I'm back to talk about the state of science fiction in 2025, or in other terms, talking about the mid-year freakout tag. And yes, I already did this for horror and other dark fiction, and so I'm going to also do this for science fiction. And I'm going to try really hard just to focus on sci-fi and not any fantasy in this video, and really hone in on how the year is going, primarily focusing on new releases, except for a few books at the end of the video. So if you're interested to know how the year is going for me in terms of science fiction, or rather how I feel the year is going in general for the genre, let's get started. All right, so let's start right out of the gate with the big question you all want to know. What is the best science fiction book I have read so far that was published in 2025? And for me, I'm going with Volatile Memory by Seth Haddon. This is a sci-fi novella that is set in a future where we have shifts that have this consciousness that is being infused within them, coming from actual identity of someone who has lived, and so you have this mask on the ship, and of course within this universe you have this individual ship that has memories it's not necessarily supposed to have. You have the complexities with this one. I recently gushed about this one, so I'll try not to be too repetitive. I will note things that I didn't make perhaps as clear in that video, is if you can't tell from some of the premise and verbiage I'm using, that this one is very modern in terms of its take on science fiction. I previously compared it to Ancillary Justice, and I really think that people who like that book will like this one as well, because again, it deals with similar themes. It's very much leaning into our modern ideas about a lot of conversations we're having right now around like personhood and identity, aspects of relationships. So it is a story that is set in a future and has some really interesting cerebral ideas that it's playing with, but it's also playing a lot more with who we are as people and what does consciousness mean and so forth. And so I think this will most appeal to readers like myself that often do read a lot of modern science fiction and enjoy those aspects that are being brought into the newer stories. I just thought this one was just solid, intelligent, the writing was great, the story was really interesting. And again, I tend to really love novellas because there's nothing to cut from them, there's no fat to trim, and instead you just get a solid story from start to finish, and this one definitely stuck out in my mind when I went to prepare this video. And then the next question is, what is your favorite sequel that came out in 2025? And again, sticking with science fiction, I'm going to go with Dark Prophet by Wick Welker. This is a book, again, I just talked about on my channel, so I'll try not to say too much here, but essentially it is a science fiction story that very much, to me, feels like it reads as having a fantasy narrative. It's very character focused. You have a lot of banter between the characters as they're going along in their journey. I can't talk too much about the plot here, but in the first book, we follow these individuals that are brought together. They have this mission. In this future, you see them striving for their goals. It's just a very easy story to fall into, to get engrossed in, and again, a narrative that really carries you from the first book into the second. And again, I just flew through this one. So if you're looking for something that you can get lost in, it's a book that again blends science fiction with into fantasy type narrative elements, where you see a story that again is very much about adventure and growth and personhood and all of these things that I love reading about often in my fantasy stories, and weaving it into this science fiction future. Really fascinating, and of course I just want the next book now. Next is the question, is there a science fiction book that was published in 2025 that you haven't read yet? And I actually had to do some looking. I try really hard to stay on top of the new releases that I care about and read them as soon as possible. But there is one coming out as of the time of this video that I haven't received. I'm hoping it's coming from the publisher, but I haven't seen it yet, so we'll see. And that of course is Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this is a new science fiction work from him. I have to check if it's meant to be a standalone or not. Basically, if I know it's science fiction by Adrian Tchaikovsky, it's an instant pickup for me. It's something I definitely want to check out. While his stories are not always 5-star experiences for me, they're still generally solid 4 stars. And again, it's crazy to see someone who is so prolific without it cutting down in the quality of their work. So I want to say highly recommend, but I haven't even read the book yet. But again, I have really high hopes for Shroud, and I suspect a lot of you watching this are also very excited to check it out if you haven't yet. Then there is the question of what upcoming releases are you most excited for, and that one is easy. The number one pick for me is Shadows Upon Time by Christopher Ruocchio, the 7th and final book in the Sun Eater series. It's a series admittedly I wasn't even a diehard fan of when I started, but as I got further into the series, I loved it more and more, and especially I've loved the last couple entries, as to me the series has shifted more so from what feels more like science fantasy at the beginning of the story, and definitely those narrative elements are still there, but it feels solidly like a space opera in the later books, because the world and the story and everything going on politically has just gotten so big towards the end. And I'm really excited to see how the author is going to pull it all together into this final story, and very much highly anticipating this one. The other one on my radar is less of a highly anticipated release, but more something that I'm keeping my eye out for, and that is Health Space by Stephen Baxter. I haven't read much or anything potentially by this author, but he's quite well known. And again, I'm always looking for more space opera, more what I believe to be hard science fiction. And so this is probably one coming out in the later half of the year that I will be watching for as I try to put together my favorite books of the year list, because if you follow my channel, you probably know that putting together my top 10 science fiction list of the year is easily the hardest. There just isn't as much coming out, and of what is coming out, there is less that is to my personal particular tastes. And so I have a good feeling or a hope that that one might end up on that top 10 list. Then we have most disappointing science fiction book of the year. And for that, I'm going to give two answers. The first one is more of a true disappointment, and that is The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip Fracassi. He is an author who often writes more horror, and this one leaned more into a sci-fi thriller, and I went to it with just what I believe to be normal, reasonable expectations. I just wanted a fun science fiction thriller ride, and what I got was just very average. It felt very flat and very simplistic. It felt like you're checking the boxes of what a sci-fi thriller should have, but it really lacked the heart or something to really make me care about, again, the characters and the plot and all of that. I think for me, what works in other stories like Dark Matter is I immediately cared so much for this man and him trying to get back to his family. And in this one, I just really didn't care about the why I was supposed to care about anything that was happening. I tend to be pretty easy to please when it comes to science fiction that delves into time travel, and so I thought this one would be an easy win for me, and it's on this part of the video because, again, it left me very disappointed. The other book I want to mention as a disappointment is not a true terrible book, but rather a book that I really thought was going to be a perfect 5 stars and fell a little bit flat for me, despite the fact that I still gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. I don't think it's bad, but it should have been amazing given the fact that I love the rest of the series so much. And that is The Martian Contingency by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is, of course, a story that starts out in the past and is an alternative history about women getting accelerated into the space program as people have to leave Earth. And so this final book, without saying too much, really dives into the future of what that might look like. And it felt like one big epilogue rather than actually having a plot in and of itself. It just kind of felt like it was wrapping up little loose ends. The major plot points and crises of the story were kind of all nothing burgers. There was nothing substantial that was happening that really needed or deserved an entire book to explore those ideas. And it, again, could have easily just been a quick, maybe 30 pages tacked on to the end of the last book, and you could have accomplished the same thing in a number of short pages. That being said, I did enjoy getting to see the characters one last time, all of that, but it felt like it was a stretch to put out this book, and given the fact that it took so many years to get published after the last one, it just felt like the author didn't know how to finish their series, and it definitely seems like that is the case by what we finally got. Again, I don't think the book is horrible, and if you have seen the rest of the series through, it's kind of worth seeing it to that final chapter. But technically, in my mind, you can read the first books as a bit of a mini companion trilogy and get a very satisfying experience that I don't think was really added to by this 4th and final book. Again, I still liked it. I still gave it a generous rating, but given the fact that I love the earlier book so much, this one easily should have been a solid 5 stars just on the nostalgia of coming back to this series and these characters, and it wasn't enough. So again, I would have been really easy to please with this final book, or so I thought, and this book still left me a little bit underwhelmed. Next is the question of what is your biggest surprise when it comes to science fiction? And for that, it's not a huge surprise, but rather a book that just came out of nowhere and really ended up delighting me. And that is All the Water in the World by Erin Caffel. And this is a post-apocalyptic story that follows, at the beginning of the story, a family that is living in this museum. The world has again had these apocalyptic environmental events, and they then have to go and survive while trying to preserve the past. It is a story that is very character focus, it's slow moving, and has a bit of a literary quality to it. I really would compare it to those of you that love Station 11. I think it has a very similar feel to it. And again, I just really enjoyed it. It felt like a little bit different than some of the other science fiction that is getting pushed in the market right now. And again, I really like it. I don't think it's for everyone. And again, it feels less like what we might consider or imagine science fiction to look like, and more something that often gets shelved as literary, futuristic, contemporary stories, whatever you want to label that. But again, I really liked it, and I do think a lot of you that again love stories in that vein will be very satisfied with that one. So a great surprise in that regard. The next category is a book that made you happy, which I often say is one of the hardest categories for me to put together in these mid-year lists. But in this case, it actually wasn't too bad for science fiction, because I immediately thought of Space Brooms by A.G. Rodriguez. And this is one that follows a space janitor who gets pulled into this larger story. It is fun and rompy, and despite having a very silly premise, I felt like the author did a good job of still having the actual story and plot have enough weight and importance that it didn't feel overly goofy. Sometimes I struggle with humorous stories because they just come across as silly, and I lose all of my feelings of caring because it just feels just crazy and out of the box. Instead, this one legitimately felt like you had this janitor who had to do these great things and got pulled into a story way over their head, and I got completely pulled into it. It was really fun, and again, I'm not someone who tends to look for happy stories and nice stories, but this one was just solidly enjoyable. If you're looking for something lighter, maybe in the vein of something like John Scalzi, and haven't been as impressed by his recent work, this one is just a great book to pick up. It's easy, it's fast, and again, I had a lot of fun with it, which is a great thing to say. And to wrap up this video, I also want to talk about science fiction stories that I haven't read yet this year, but I do want to get to before the end of the year. And so for this category, I'm going to focus on backlist science fiction because again, there's a whole nother category in this video that talks about upcoming releases. And so I picked out 3 books for this. They'll likely end up on my fall TBR. I'm not necessarily sure exactly when I'm going to read them, but as I look through my Goodreads list, these are ones that popped out of ones that I really do want to either revisit or read for the first time. The first one is actually a short story collection, something I don't read a lot of in terms of the format, and that is Stories of Your Life by Ted Chiang. This is technically a reread for me. I read this collection after the movie Arrival came out. However, I read this collection when I was postpartum, very tired and not getting much sleep, and as a very intellectual piece of collected science fiction, I just feel like I gave this stories a disservice, or at least gave a disservice to myself by reading it in a point of time where I had absolutely no brain power. And so I've been always meaning to go back to it. I really liked it despite how absolutely exhausted I was when I read it. And so I really think I'm going to love it so much more revisiting it with hopefully a little bit more brain space to consume and really contemplate the stories in there. And I know Ted Chiang is just such a beloved author. I know he has a whole nother short story collection, which again, if I like that one, I want to read this one and so forth. But I do want to go check out that one and again, give it some proper space on my channel if I have more to say about it. Next, we have Scythe by Neil Shusterman, and this of course is a young adult dystopian story, one that I honestly held off reading for a while because the premise sounded kind of crazy, that you have a future where I believe people can't die, and so you have individuals that job it is to take people away and help with overpopulation. It sounds a little bit bizarre, but everyone I know and a lot of people I really trust and respect their recommendations for books swear by this series, or at least the first couple books are supposed to be amazing. So I will check it out. I've had it on my list forever. I think it might be kind of good to read during spooky season if it's a little bit darker and all of that. And again, I don't read a lot of YA, but I am finding myself dabbling into it. I feel like I've read so much of the adult genre that sometimes I just need to mix it up and again, read something as a little bit of a palate cleanser. And I have read him before back in my teenage days, many years ago. I did read some of his earlier books like Unwind and enjoyed them at the time. But again, it'll be interesting to see how I feel about his books now that I'm reading them many years later. And finally, I want to read Shards of Honor by Louis McMaster-Bujold. And this is the beginning of a really long-running series that so many people have told me to read. I've read one almost standalone book that exists within this universe, and I've always meant to go back to the beginning, And then I haven't. And again, I've been trying to read more science fiction by different authors. This is one that always gets recommended to me. And I always mean to read it sometime, but if I don't put it on actual TBR and plan when I'm going to read it, I feel like I'll keep passing it over for no good reasons. So hold me to it. I need to come back to this book before the end of the year because I really think I'll enjoy it and the overall series. And again, hopefully find a new favorite author as well. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out? And as well, I'd love to hear your answers to these questions. What's your favorite science fiction book of the year so far? Biggest disappointment? Book that made you happy? All of that. Feel free to answer any and all of the questions, and I'd love to hear from you down below. If you enjoyed this video, hopefully you stick around and subscribe. You can hit that little notification bell so you never miss a video from me. Give me a thumbs up if I deserved it. Drop a comment, even just an emoji to let me know you're here. Otherwise, I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.